Nick Geber and Frank Perez and Oklahoma Brian on remote. We're going to talk to Oklahoma's going to star in the next, well, for the rest of this hour. We're going to be talking about politics, and not the usual politics you see on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or read about in the paper. This is maybe more important. Here's how you can maybe make some money on betting on political races. Before we go to Oklahoma, Frank, have you ever bet on an election?
Oh yeah, I made a ton on the last one.
You did?
Yeah, a ton.
What kind of odds did you get on? I guess Trump.
At one point, I bet my last 2,000 at Trump plus 1020 when the exit polls were coming out, and they were all betting Hillary, and I couldn't believe it, and I kept betting it all the way through on Trump until I finally at plus $1.40 I stopped betting, even though he was winning every state. I just said I don't know what's going to happen here, but he was winning every state, and he was still plus money.
Well, regardless of what you think about Trump, that's just genius analysis, and maybe we'll get into more about what you saw.
Like what Brian's going to talk about right now. This is not going to be fake news. This is going to be the real deal.
There's our first zinger.
This is where you put your money where the info's at now.
All right. No, for sure. All right, so Oklahoma, here we go. Before we get into some of the analysis you've done on these races and the odds of impeachment and things like that, which we'll be discussing, first of all, where can you bet on American political races, elections here in the United States? Help us out, Brian.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. When we think of betting in general, first place we think of is Las Vegas, right? We kind of think of the Las Vegas Strip as kind of the Wall Street of sports betting, and oftentimes that's not the case. In sports betting, it's certainly not the case because you cannot bet on elections. Sorry, I'm going to say elections. You can't bet on elections in Las Vegas. You need to go offshore or to Europe. And the same thing is true with these new states that have recently come on board with legalized sports betting. Elections are not within their are not one of the items on the menu, and it's not clear whether that will change. Several sports books have been campaigning, no pun intended, to to get the elections added to events they can bet on, but. It's an item that's that's governed by the Gaming Control Board. Every few years, more and more stuff is added to it. I don't know if you guys remember, but it wasn't long. It was only 6-7 years ago. You couldn't bet on the Heisman Trophy or the Cy Young winner. That was added in about 2011. But U.S. elections are still not available in Nevada.
That's interesting stuff. I mean, I'm looking right now at some political bets that one can make. This is an offshore book. If you're interested to know which offshore books to use, guys, you can send us a note. We're happy to recommend a couple to you. But this is a particularly good one. And they have some really fun political bets. Because I think political bets are more than anything just fun. They're prop bets, basically. So,
sure.
Here we go. So I'll put some out there. Is Donald Trump going to be president on January the 1st of next year? It's a minus 2,000. It's 20 to 1. 1 in 20 that he's going to be president. However, it's plus 1,000. It's 10 to 1 odds that he's gone by January the 1st. Is Kim Jong-un going to be supreme leader of North Korea come January the 1st, 2019? Currently, the bookmakers have him at minus 2,600. That's fair. That's 1 in 26. He's going to be there, and plus 1,200 that he's not going to be there.
Yeah.
So some of these odds are less than the chances of Real Madrid winning the Champions League this year. So you have to look. What do the bookmakers know about Kim Jong-un that I don't?
Yeah, but does assassination or accidents count?
I think anything counts.
I don't see any small print here, Frank.
What?
If you have a heart attack, you win your bet if you bet he's gone.
Yeah, because Trump's in his 70s, and then Kim
He eats hamburgers.
He's a McDonald's guy.
All right, I know the zingers will come out. All right, Oklahoma, steer this thing back on course. What do you think?
Can we talk about assassination odds without having a knock at our door on Monday morning? You might want to be careful with that.
Yeah, right.
So it is interesting, though. These things are fast moving. The events in Helsinki last week really rattled the market. The odds of Trump being reelected in 2020 moved from about even money before Helsinki to he's now about plus 150. So that's a pretty dramatic move in terms
Really?
of and yeah. And those are the kind of things with elections that provide a lot of opportunity for bettors. But, even if you're not a bettor, it's incredibly insightful just to keep an eye on betting markets. They tell you a lot of things, oftentimes that the real news or the fake news or whatever news you choose to watch might not be telling you. I know last week with the Supreme Court, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, with the Supreme Court announcement of Brett Kavanaugh being the president's pick, that was totally telegraphed by the betting markets. If you had been watching the betting markets, you would have known early that morning that Kavanaugh was the pick. And he was actually the opening favorite at the time of Kennedy's retirement announcement and stayed the favorite through the entire process.
I'd like to just say that I think you just absolutely nailed something that in terms of political prognostication, even world events about what's going to happen in economics and so forth, the betting markets really are better predictors than, say, exit polls. Good example of that, I bet on the 2004 election, and that was I was live betting at Betfair and also Olympic. I lost a fair amount of money because they called John Kerry. They called Florida for John Kerry. And so I still found it, I think, at minus 180. And, of course, Bush ends up winning the 2004 election. But you have to be on top of those things. And all the exit polls showing one thing, and then, of course, the real market showing something quite different. You're right. When it comes to predicting what's going to happen, follow the money.
Yeah. And, even reading, exit polls can be insightful, but you have to always evaluate the source. A lot of people get kind of tripped up thinking that they have access to internal polls and misinterpreting polls and not understanding that every single poll that's conducted, for the most part, has an agenda, right? These polls are not conducted just for the sake of enhancing the world's knowledge about our race. They're usually trying to manipulate public opinion in some way. So you have to really kind of understand who's conducting these polls and what their agenda is, and even then
there's some interesting stuff because I'm looking here. So the odds for the next presidential election are obviously favoring a Democrat, minus 126, and Republicans are plus 106. That's a fairly good spread, actually.
Like baseball, 20-cent line, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's not bad.
10-cent line, excuse me. Yeah.
Frank, what do you think of that?
Well, I like Trump at plus 150. That's all. That's all I can. I mean, because if you designate Trump, he's plus 150 versus designating a Republican plus 106,
I got it.
right?
Okay, all right. So you think Trump's going to both get the nomination for re-election and win re-election at plus 150?
Which
do. Trump though? Because right now there's great odds on Ivanka at plus 10,000. So you get 1,000 to 1 on Ivanka Trump winning the next presidential election.
You can scalp this. Like, you can take Donald Trump right now at plus 150, and then if he goes, let's say the next 2 or 3 meetings or whatever he does really good, and then you can take him, like, you can take the other side minus 120, take the it's going to flip-flop back and forth. But Brian's absolutely right about indicators. Nothing indicates truth in this planet right now more than money. So, like, I believe that the betting markets for elections are as pure for value like eBay is to selling products.
Right.
What value is. Mm-hmm. He's absolutely right.
So then Greg Popovich to win the presidential election at plus 10,000 is a reasonable bet. It's a good long shot, possible value.
That's why he's plus 10,000.
Yeah, well, there you go. So if you got to put in 1,000, you could win a lot of money.
1,000, you win 10 million.
I would vote for him only if Steve Kerr is the running mate.
Hey, gentlemen, that'd be a slam dunk. Boom,
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, well.
My favorite is Jared Kushner winning the presidential election at plus 20. This is just fun. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
This is just fun stuff. I mean, to see that, number one, somebody actually bothered to to get a line for. I mean, if Jon Stewart has a line to win the presidential election, which he does at plus 20,000, does that mean somebody out there has placed a wager on Jon Stewart winning, or are these just lines?
Well, that's a really interesting point. No, obviously they probably haven't, and it's a great way for bookmakers to get free advertising, which is essentially what you just gave them. But what's interesting, a lot of these lines do not have inverse bets available, so you cannot bet the opposite of a lot of these, which is something to be careful with always.
So you can't bet $1 million on something to try to win back,
well,
$100.
There is actually on
right?
these.
Yeah.
This is they do have field winning the election versus your bet, but it is break time. We're gonna have to go to break.
Oh wow!
now.
Well, good thing is, gentlemen, we still have another 15 minutes or so to talk more about politics, and we're going to talk about the politics that everybody can agree on: how to make money. That's one thing. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everybody can get on that train, right?
Absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, we'll be back with Oklahoma Brian and Frank Perez and Nick Geber. I'm your host this time, Nolan Dalla. We'll be back, talk more politics here on Fifth Street Sports, talk you can bet on. All right, welcome back. Fifth Street Sports, I'm Nolan Dalla. We were talking, gentlemen, about politics and how you can bet on it and maybe make some money. But before we talk more to Oklahoma Brian about how you can make some money, should we be betting on something as important as and our civic duty of voting in elections? What do you think, Frank?
No, I truthfully do not believe that it should be fully legalized, like at your grocery store or your convenience store, like the lottery, because of the fact that like the win or like if you bet on a football team and they win, well, they get a trophy and they win a Super Bowl. But now you're betting on people that are going to make a huge difference in other people's lives. A certain congressman can, make it bad for one city and now you're betting on that. I don't think it should be like easily accessible to bet by all the public.
Well, I don't believe it is legal to bet on politics as we sit right now. In fact, my understanding is that the House and the Senate are currently considering a bill to demand an integrity fee from the sports books. But no one can find their integrity to give it to them. Actually, Frank, your argument is very interesting because what you're essentially saying is that by betting on politics, you have the potential to undermine the integrity of our election process. But can you not use that same argument for any sports betting? This is the argument that those scumbags at the NCAA are making about, well, sports betting can question the integrity of our game. So isn't that the same argument, Frank?
Yeah, but it's a lot harder to detect it. Let's say I don't know how deep you would be able to bet into like city congressmen or councilmen, but see, it's hard to fix a game. Like if you wanted to throw a game, because I think it's very difficult. But if you're a single politician...
Hold on. It's hard to fix a team game.
Right.
It's not hard to fix, and not that I've tried, don't get me wrong, I'm not committing to anything here. But I mean, I can't imagine it's all that hard to fix a tennis match or a golf tournament.
Well,
Miss a putt. Because there's so many different props that go on, right?
Right, but see, like in a golf thing, it's very difficult because let's say I'm, Jordan Spieth, and I say to you, and you say to me, "Hey, don't win today. Play bad, miss some putts, just make it look good." Well, big deal. There's still 80 other guys. You might be able to win a little bit on the matchups, okay? But still, it's just not worth it at that level. But for a politician to throw something, all you got to do is, let's say I'm going to win the city councilman of Nevada, and you don't want me to win. So you pay me like $1 million to not win. All I got to do is send out one stupid tweet and say something racist or something stupid, and I'm not going to win.
There's a punchline in there somewhere
about you
about
being urinated on by a bunch of Russian prostitutes, right? I mean, PB pictures. There you go. Yeah, got it.
All right, gentlemen. So the Supreme Court is divided here. Coming in and casting the deciding vote is Brian. Any moral trepidation about voting on elections?
Betting.
Absolutely not. But, here's
betting,
the thing.
Voting,
Yeah,
yes.
here's the thing.
Betting, no.
Here's the thing we have to remember when we're betting on elections. It is so hard to get down on election betting that, you know, if you could somehow talk a book into putting odds up on the scenario you just described, good luck getting $100-200 down. Yeah, maybe in the presidential election, you know, you can get down millions, but in small scale local politics, we're talking about a micro bet. So
There's not enough of what you're saying, Brian, is there's not enough of a market, right?
not enough for anybody to throw away. I mean, the filing fee to run for that race you just described is probably $500, $1,000, depending on the state. So, no, there's zero chance of remember, it was only maybe 12 years ago that I think it was Paul Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld were considering having a betting market funded by the State Department, right? Where we
Yes, that's
actually
true.
invite I actually think it's a great asset to society. I think we should it should be the one form of gambling that should be legal before anything else, because I actually think it provides valuable information.
Well, I've got some valuable information for everybody. That right now, it's 6-1 odds on Dwayne Johnson running for The Rock running for U.S. president in 2020.
Really?
Well, it's plus 600. You got
Are
60.
there? I'll tell you what the odds I've been looking for. And by the way, Nick, you stole my integrity fee joke. I was sitting on that. I was going to be a thinger, but you stole that from me.
He saw your notes, sir. What do you think, Brian?
I guess so. No, is there odds on the PP tape? I've been looking all over for that. I can't find that anywhere. And I would like to bet that.
I would like to bet it. Would you bet? I mean, I wonder what the odds would be. You mean
I want to see the wording of the question.
Is there a Donald Trump PP tape out there that will come to them that will be published sometime within the next year? What odds would you give for that one?
Boy, I would like to think I could get 15, 20 to 1 to want to bet that. But I think, if I could get something around there, I would bet it, sure.
Well, but I don't see, unfortunately, that bet available. Although maybe if there's a bookmaker in Costa Rica listening and they would like to create a line for that, the PP tape line, maybe we should take it.
All right, let's clean this show up, gentlemen. Let's clean this show up a little bit, and let's get down to some nitty-gritty about betting on at least the midterms. And this is something that hardcore aficionados of politics will get. Maybe a lot of people will be lulled to sleep here, but I don't think so. Not if you want to make some money. And we'll talk about things like that I know Brian has studied. What are the chances that Democrats retake the House? What are the chances the Democrats take the Senate, which are much longer odds? Let's talk about what's coming up here in the next, 3 to 4 months, Brian. What work have you done on this topic?
Sure. Okay, that's interesting. Let's talk about the House and Senate first. The Senate's really interesting. The Senate, Democrats are, I'd say, a pretty reasonable consensus line is Democrats are about 20% to take the Senate, okay? And if you go into Reddit or message boards where people are kind of debating the merits of the odds and where the value is, you see a lot of people that think this is a really crazy proposition, that you see people arguing that it should be 99 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 based on, comparing the math of all of these separate races. Because if you, not to get too off topic, but just to kind of frame the issue here, Democrats need to pick up 2 seats and then essentially hold serve in 9 other races. Just to make a long story short. So the odds of that happening, you would think mathematically, it seems like a really big long shot. The important thing to remember, though, when you're betting elections, these are somewhat correlated events, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the world in the next 3 months. We don't know if there's going to be a sequel to Helsinki or what's going to happen with the Mueller probe. But generally speaking, these are not independent events. Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, Donnelly in Indiana, Manchin in West Virginia, the crazy races in Arizona and Nevada, they're somewhat linked. I don't know that anybody really knows what's going to happen in terms of the sheer motivation and energy on each side of the.
By the way, you think there's some Brian, is there a correlation between, again, let's suppose there was, the Republicans continue to struggle, at least in terms of public perception and kind of without getting political, there's some perception that the Democrats could do very well in 2018 for obvious reasons. But so how goes Nevada? Should that also happen in places like Arizona, West Virginia? In other words, if Democrats do very well in those states, they're going to do very well everywhere. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, right? And I mean, we all, for the most part, I was about to say we all watch the same news, but obviously that's not the case anymore. But we all watch national news, I think is a better way of saying it, right? Where we might choose the flavor of national news that's the most, appropriate for what we want to watch. But we're consuming the same information for the most part on a national basis. So yeah, they're very correlated, and that's the mistake that a lot of people make when they think that Republicans are slam dunk at minus 400. Not so fast, my friend, I think is what Lee Corso would say, right?
All right, so I'm not a gun guy, so I'm not going to say gun to your head, but I am going to say, Brian, feather to your feet. I'm tickling you, and to make me stop tickling you, you've got to give us again, Oklahoma Brian's election picks right now. What would you say go out and bet if you can find it?
How much time do we have?
You've got about 2 minutes.
Okay. Two things. First of all, if I had to pick my favorite bet, I love the bet on will Donald Trump be impeached. Essentially, we're looking at taking control of the House as the biggest predictor of this. And I think a lot of times people that don't really have a great background in civics or politics don't completely understand the definition of impeachment, right? By impeachment, we're simply talking with being formally charged by the House, not necessarily being convicted. So just the act of being charged by the House, and I feel pretty confident that if Democrats take control of the House by even a very small margin, that will be a very likely outcome.
How did Bill Clinton get away with it?
We have a limited amount of time. I have one other thing that I want to mention, which is maybe the best.
He's stonewalling, by the way, Brian. We'll cut him off and come back to him later. Go ahead, Brian.
No, because he wasn't he impeached?
He was impeached by the House, but the Senate didn't vote on it.
Yeah, you need 60. Okay. You need more vote. It's not a majority thing. All right, give us your other pick, Brian.
Well, no, what I was going to say is, look, here's your best angle in trying to make money on sports betting or on election betting is stay on top of this, because as interested as you might be in this is a very minor consideration for a lot of bookmakers, and it's not uncommon for them to have stale lines. So find a website that you think is a very accurate and quickly updated website. Continue to consume as much news as you can, and wait for these little books to fall asleep. And that's where the money is made in betting elections, is sleepy lines at the smaller books.
Well, that's some great advice, and let me just echo everything you said about looking for an edge and looking for micro opportunities to bet. I'll give you a very short story about why are you betting on elections. I've been asked that, like, are you crazy? Why would you bet on the Grammys or the Academy Awards and things like that? Well, in my view, those are much more predictable events. Much more predictable events than which way a ball is going to bounce. When you have professional athletes fighting on a gridiron and trying to predict who's going to cross a goal line or cover a 7-point spread, boy, I'll tell you what, the biggest bet I ever made in politics, about 5 or 6, I forgot how, it was fairly significant. It was back during Betfair days when they were taking live betting, and Merkel was running in Germany. There was no way she wasn't going to win. And she was, I think, around minus 160, and there was some minor scandal going on at the time, but that was like a slam dunk. Elections, getting back to North Korea. If there's an election in North Korea, I'll take in my entire net worth, and I will, which is about $67 right now, and I would lay it, to win two dimes on, who's going to win that. I mean, there are events in the world, ladies and gentlemen, that are very predictable, and politics is surprisingly one of those things in the outcome of elections.
One of my biggest bets up until, before I had
10 seconds.
like more credit was on the Peterson trial. Like I voted,
Wow,
like
you bet on that.
there was mistrial, guilty, not guilty, all that. I bet him guilty.
All right.
Laid like 220.
There's a sick man, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Let's close up by saying the man who just told you shouldn't be betting on elections is betting on a murder trial.
Well, you know how much you could have made. You know how much you could have made on Casey Anthony being
right, we're
acquitted.
gonna go to break.
I'm
We'll be
Nolan
right back.
Dalla. We just keep on fighting. We'll be back and we'll close this first hour off on Fifth Street Sports.